Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Tuesday, July 30th edition of the MMAOB Daily podcast. I'm your host, as always, Adam Martin. I'll be taking you guys through the latest in the world of mixed martial arts. First and foremost, guys, follow me on Twitter at MMAdamMartin. This podcast is available at MMAOddsbreaker.com and on our YouTube channel. Please like, share, and subscribe. Also, check me out at bjpenn.com and MMARings.net. So today's going to be a pretty cool show, actually. There's a lot of fight announcements the last couple of days. I was not able to get to them because I recapped UFC 240 yesterday, so today's going to be all about feature fight announcements for some upcoming cards. It's going to be a pretty cool show. Also wanted to plug the podcast of myself and Cole Sheldon. We'll be breaking down UFC Newark pretty much immediately following this podcast at 11 o'clock Eastern time. So I'll be doing this show. I'll take a small break, and then I'll be back with Cole to break down the UFC card in New Jersey this weekend. But before we do that, of course, I want to talk about this show. So a lot of fight announcements, guys. There's definitely some good fights coming up. I'm going to start with one that doesn't actually have a card announced for yet. Dana White did say this fight could take place at UFC Abu Dhabi, but I don't think that's going to happen now. It's likely to take place later in the year. You guys know what fight I'm talking about. BJ Penn is returning to fight Nik Lentz. All right, so I have a few thoughts on this. First and foremost, I obviously work for bjpenn.com, so I have to say that right now, I have a conflict of interest talking about this fight, which is the first time I've ever really had a conflict of interest talking about any sort of fight involving any fighter, because I've never really been connected to a website involving a fighter. In this case, I do work for bjpenn.com, so I have to say that right away. Do I think BJ should fight again? No, I don't. He's lost 7 straight fights. That should say it all. And he's retired before, so it's not like, he's made a decision to come back after not fighting for a while. I mean, he retired a couple of years ago. And he came back and he hasn't looked that great. Having said that, BJ Penn is a legend, and who am I to tell him not to fight, right? So from my perspective, I personally didn't expect him to fight again. I thought Dana White said that he wasn't going to let him fight again, but Dana White says he blew up his phone and he's letting him fight again. So BJ wants to do what BJ wants to do. It is what it is. I really can't say much more about that than I don't think he should have came back, but I respect the guy, and if he wants to come back and fight, who am I going to tell him not to fight? So as far as this matchup goes, I mean, it's kind of a tough matchup. You look at the last fight with Clay Guida, I feel like that kind of is how this fight's going to go. I mean, Nik Lentz is a grinder, great cardio. We know how he does it. He pushes guys against the fence, takes them down, holds them on the ground. That's probably how this fight's going to play out. But at the same time, BJ is a submission artist, and he does have some knockout power. So if this fight goes to the ground, maybe he can wrap it with guillotine. I'm not sure if that's the way this fight's going to end. I mean, honestly, he's 40 years old at this point, and he has lost 7 straight fights. So he's going to be a massive underdog. It's not like I'm saying anything that's surprising here, guys. He's going to be a big dog at the sports books. Nik Lentz probably wins this fight, but it is a grudge match. I think there's going to be a lot of trash talking into lead up for it, so that'll be interesting. Again, I'm surprised BJ's coming back, guys, just like you guys are, with 7 straight losses. But again, the guy's a competitor. He wants to win a fight. And I was at his last win. That was against Matt Hughes in 2010. It's been a while. Imagine he does win this fight, though. Imagine he goes out there and beats Nik Lentz, retires on a win over a guy like Nik Lentz, who I think is a really good fighter. That would be one hell of a way to end a career. So we'll see what happens there. Again, I think Nik Lentz will probably be like a -400, -500 favorite in this fight if I had to guess, just because of the grinding ability and the way the Clay Guida fight played out. But BJ is a guy that obviously has finished people before, so we'll see what happens. I obviously had to talk about this fight because it's a fight announcement, but again, I do work for bjpenn.com, and I had to say that right off the bat because people are going to accuse me of being biased, and I just had to mention that. So anyways, let's get into the other fight announcements. UFC Mexico City has a bunch of fights coming on tap here. A lot of really good fights here, guys. Main event of the evening, Yair Rodriguez versus Jeremy Stephens. I love this matchup. A little surprised by it. I thought they were going to probably do Brian Ortega against Rodriguez or something, but they're doing this fight instead. Maybe Ortega's going to fight Magomed Sherpov. That's not announced yet. We'll see what happens there. Yair Rodriguez, Pantera, 11-2 record, 26 years old, guys. He's so young still. His record in the UFC is 7-1, coming off a nasty knockout win over Chan Sung Jung in one of the best fights of all time last November. It was an incredible fight. Last second knockout, 4:59 in the 5th round. You can't get later than that. So an amazing finish, an amazing fight. He's a great fighter. He's the one lost to Frankie Edgar, but looked great against Jung, I think, anyways, in the finish. He was I guess he was losing that fight, to be fair, but it was a great fight, an amazing fight. And this should be a great fight with Stephens, who, again, is one of the most well-respected, well-traveled veterans in the UFC featherweight division, 28-16 records, 33 years old. So he's actually a bit younger than I expected, considering he's been in the UFC since, 2007? He's been in the UFC for 12 years. So he's been around for a long time. He has a lot of good wins. He is coming off 2 straight losses to Magomed Sharapov and Aldo, but he did knock out Josh Emmett not too long ago. That was last year. So this guy has fought the best of the best in the world at 145 and 155. He's an amazing talent. We'll see what happens in this fight. Definitely an interesting matchup. I'd have to favor Rodriguez just based on the fact he's a lot younger, based on the fact he's coming off of a really incredible win. But Stevens is game, and he's going to make this a really tough fight. So amazing fight. Love the matchup, and I can't wait for this one. But I'd have to favor Rodriguez ever so slightly. Next up, another fight. UFC Mexico City had a bunch of fights announced. I've talked about some of them in the past shows, but I'm just going to talk about the ones that were just announced over the weekend at UFC 240. They had the event on the screen, and they announced some new fights. So let's get to the new ones. Marion Reneau versus Irene Aldana. That's another fight that's just been booked. Marion Reneau, 9-5-1 record. She's one of the older females in the UFC right now. She's 42 years old, but she still fights like a young fighter. She's coming off 2 straight losses at Kunchenko and Zingano, but she has beaten some pretty good fighters like Sarah McMahon, Jessica Andrade. She finished her a couple years ago. So Marion Reneau she is 42, guys, but she's a young 42. She's a really good fighter, I think, taking on Aldana here. Aldana, 10-5 record, 31. She'll be fighting in her home country, Mexico here, coming off a very close split decision loss to Raquel Pennington. Before that, had won 3 straight fights. So definitely a very close fight, a very competitive fight. Could go either way. I think the fact that it is in Mexico will help Aldana out, but man, I kind of think Reneau is a better fighter. I think she's a little bit more solid. She's older. She's 11 years older, she's 11 years older. So you got to keep that in mind, but I feel like she's just a better striker, and I think her ground game might be just as good, if not better. So ball match fight, don't get me wrong, it could go either way. I'm kind of leaning towards Reneau. I'm kind of hoping she's an underdog because I think there would be some value on her, but we'll see what happens there. Next up, Paul Craig against Vinicius Moreira. Definitely the loser of this fight, I think, will be released from the UFC. Both guys just have not got the job done in the UFC for the most part. Paul Craig, 11-4 record, 31 years old. We know his story is he's actually 3-4 in the UFC, and his 3 wins are by miracle submission for the most part. Well, I guess the Luis Henrique de Silva win was in the second round, but the Ankalaev and Kennedy and Nchekwu wins were late in the third round, and he was losing both those fights. He came back and won. Good for him. I mean, his ground game was sick, but man, the rest of his game is definitely very suspect. He's lost 4 fights in the UFC, I should say, by stoppage. So the guy's chin is not great. His submission defense isn't great. Definitely a guy to be worried about. I would not personally want to put money on Paul Craig. And then you have Vinicius Moreira, 9-3 record, 30 years old. He's also looked really bad in the UFC. 2 straight losses to Alonzo Menefield and Eric Anders, but he did beat John Allen in the Contender Series in Brazil last year. And John Allen actually looked really good against Mike Rodriguez. So this is a close fight. People are going to fade Moreira because his chin is terrible. But Paul Craig, I mean, it's hard to trust him, right? Paul Craig, I would slightly lean towards him in this one. But, man, not a fight that I personally would bet on because both these guys are very difficult to trust with your money. And next up, the other fight announcement I want to mention is Sergio Pettis against Alex Perez. Sergio Pettis, 11-5 record. And I should mention this fight's actually in the flyweight division, so I like that. Pettis, 17-5 record, 25 years old. He's on two fight losing streak to Rob Font, UC for Miga. No problem with those losses. He also beat Joseph Benavidez last year, and that's a great win. Benavidez is number 1 contender right now, so that's an awesome win. Pettis obviously is a good fighter. And then you have Perez, 22-5, 27 years old. He is 4-1 in the UFC. The one lost to Benavidez, so that's their common opponent here, coming off a win over Mark De La Rosa in what I believe was a bantamweight fight. Yes, it was. So moving back down to flyweight here. This is a close fight. Both guys are very talented young fighters. I kind of lean towards Perez a little bit. I've been just a little bit more impressed, and I think that going back to flyweight will help him, but definitely can go either way, guys. I'm curious to see what happens in this fight. And what else? I think that's it for UFC Mexico City as far as the new fight announcements go. You can go check out the Tapology page to see what the other fights are. I've talked about them all in the past on previous editions of the show, so I'll continue to talk about any new fights are announced. Again, I feel like they're going to add one more big fight to this card, but maybe not because they do have the Grasso Esparza fight as the co-main event right now, although I do think that Brian Ortega versus Magomed Sharapov would be a sick fight. All right, next up, UFC Uruguay has a few fight announcements, and some of them, actually, all 3 of them are due to injury, so that's something to keep in mind here. First up, you got Alexey Kunchenko taking on Gilbert Burns. I'm just pulling up the records here, guys. 1 second. Where is he? Kunchenko. Okay. Alexey Kunchenko's looked really good in the UFC, and he's 20. He's 20-0. I mean, this guy has an incredible record. 35 years old, so he's an older guy, but he's looked incredible. Back-to-back wins in the UFC over Yushin Okami and Thiago Alves. So this guy's looked great. He's undefeated since making his debut in 2013 in MMA. He's an older guy, like I mentioned, but just a very talented fighter. And I'm curious to see how far he can go in the sport because he's an older guy, but he's very good. And then he takes on Gilbert Burns here, 33. So Gilbert Burns is a little bit older than I actually figured. Gilbert Burns is 8-3 in the UFC, coming off back-to-back wins over Mike Davis and Olivier Aubin-Mercier. He's won 4 of his last 5 fights, fighting at 170 in this fight. That's interesting to me. Obviously, Burns, most of his fights have been in the lightweight division, but clearly he wants to make the move to welterweight. And it could be the right move because he's had a lot of issues cutting weight, and he is taking this fight on very short notice, filling in for the injured Laureano Staropoli. And I think that Staropoli versus Kunchenko fight would have been really good. But this is a good fight, too. I have to lean towards Kunchenko, though. I mean, 20-0, you have to lean towards this guy. He is definitely a very incredible talent, I think, and he just needs to get that real big win to break through in a very stacked welterweight division. But we'll see what happens in this fight. I'm curious to see how this one goes and plays out because if it goes to the ground, Gilbert Burns will have a chance. But if it stays on the feet, I would definitely favor Kunchenko. What else here? Next up, a couple other ones here. Rodrigo Vargas against Alex da Silva. That's another one here. So Alex da Silva, 22 record, fighting over Brazil. He lost his UFC debut to Alexander Yakovlev. He was actually winning the fight and then somehow lost in the second round. So to me, that's kind of a bad loss because Yakovlev's a guy that's barely in the UFC at this point, taking on Rodrigo Vargas. It's kind of strange it's on this card because this guy's actually from Mexico. You thought that they would save him for that card, but coming off 2 straight wins on the regional scene in Kabachi, he beat Mike Della Torre, former UFC fighter, via head kick in just 18 seconds in the last fight. So definitely a very interesting prospect here based on that win. UFC liked him, obviously, enough to sign him. He's I got some good experience fighting in Tachipal's fights, for instance. He fought that guy, Jordan Williams, who just fought in the Contender Series, and actually he beat him. So by doctor stoppage in the first round. So this guy's an interesting prospect, and I have to look into this one more, but this guy looks interesting. So I would definitely take a look at this guy. But again, he's fighting on very short notice, so keep that in mind. And finally, Rachel Ostovich is out, and filling in against Veronica Macedo is Polyana Viana. Polyana Viana, 10-3 record. She's 1-2 in the UFC. She's lost back-to-back fights against Hannah Cifers and JJ Aldrich. The Cifers fight was very close. She has a win over Amanda Ribas, who looks pretty good. Taking on Veronica Macedo here. 5-3-1 record, and in the UFC she's 0-3-1 no contest. Just has not got the job done. Coming off a loss to Jillian Robertson, also lost to Andrea Lee and Ashley Emmett Smith. And I'm sorry, I'm wrong about that. She's actually 0-3. The draw was before she made it to the UFC, so she just does not have a good record. I think she's a better fighter than her record indicates, but she just hasn't got the job done. You have to lean towards Viana, who's actually got some decent wins in the UFC. And the other one I want to talk about, this is at UFC Vancouver. Michel Pereira is taking on Sergey Khandozhko. So Michel Pereira, he is 22-9-2 no contest, coming off 2 straight wins, including an incredible knockout over Danny Robertson's UFC debut. There's an awesome win. This guy is really fun to watch, and he's taking on, like I mentioned, Sergey Khandozhko. Got to pull his record out. But I know he also picked up a win in his debut against that guy with the really hairy chest. What's his name? Rostem Akhman. Yeah. 26-5-1 record, 3 straight wins. He beat Akhman in his debut in a really, really competitive fight. Close one here, but I mean, Pereira's got that finishing ability, so you have to kind of, I think, lean towards him a little bit, but definitely an interesting fight. And the other fight announcement I want to mention here is Mackenzie Dern is returning to the Octagon, and it's Amanda Ribas, who I just announced. And the card is not set yet, but it's going to be in October. Mackenzie Dern recently had a child a few months ago, so I'm surprised she's coming back so soon, personally. That's her call, but you think she would have wanted to take some time off, but I guess, obviously, when you have a kid, you need money to pay for that kid, so I guess that's kind of what she's thinking here. She's 7-0. Obviously, Mackenzie Dern is one of the best women's prospects in the world. We all know that. She is an interesting fighter because of her ground game. She hasn't fought in over a year now because she was pregnant, of course, but she did pick up 2 wins over Ashley Yoder and Amanda Cooper in the UFC, and had some pretty good wins in the regional scene before that and Invicta, including a win in Legacy over Montel De La Rosa, which was obviously a great win. We all know how good her ground game is. Taking on Amanda Ribas here. Amanda Ribas, she picked up a win in her debut against Emily Whitmire. Really good win. 25 years old. She's pretty young. She's only lost once in her career to Polyana Viana, and all of her wins except for one are by stoppage. So this is a tough fight, I think, for Mackenzie Dern, coming off a layoff and coming off pregnancy. It seems like a tough matchup because Ribas looked amazing in her last fight. She was coming off a layoff, 2-3 year layoff, and came back and looked fantastic against a really good, I think, fighter in Whitmire. So this is a tough fight for Mackenzie Dern. She'll probably be favored because she's a big name and she's very popular. People like her, but don't be surprised if Ribas pulls this off. I'll be curious to see what the odds are. And again, that card, I don't believe has been announced. Let me just pull this up. List of UFC events. The one in October. Okay, so actually that's at the one in Chase Center. So that's the Michelle Waterston and J-Tech card. That's TBD right now, but it looks like that's going to be the card. So the one in San Francisco. So that looks like it's going to be on that event, but we'll see what happens because UFC could always change their mind and move it to another card. Same with the, like I said, the BJ Penn and Nik Lentz fight earlier that I talked about. So that's it, guys. I mean, there's a lot of fight announcements. I had to get to all of them. Some really good fights coming up, of course. And the UFC just continues to fill out the card for the rest of the year. There's tons of events. It's crazy. Like the schedule is really nuts going forward. Going to just looking at it right now, you can pull out your Wikipedia and they have a list of events. There's 4 events in August, 4 events in September, 4 events in October, 3 events in November, and 3 events in December. And that's just UFC. There's also Bellator as well. So there's a lot of MMA coming up. That's a good thing for guys like us to write about it, but it's going to be a lot of weekends filled with MMA. So if you want to make plans, make sure to schedule around these cards because there's some really good fights coming up. And anyone who's watching this show obviously is a fight nerd just like myself. So the fights come first, right? But yeah, there's going to be a lot of fights coming up, guys. So if you want to take vacation or something like that, I would definitely take a look at the schedule and see, what card you want to miss. Like, for instance, maybe that Andrade Zhang card that starts at 3 in the morning in late August. Maybe that's a card to schedule a vacation for. I don't know. Maybe the one in October in Singapore, October 26th. Maybe you take a break then or something. But, there's a lot coming up here. So I'll be covering them all. I always do. But it's crazy. The schedule is really nuts going forward. And if you had to ask me, I think it's going to be even crazier next year. I think the UFC is going to continue to do events, especially while the fighters are signing with Contender Series and stuff like that. There's just so many fighters coming into the UFC these days. So, yeah, I mean, it's nuts. But, yeah, I'll be here breaking all the fights, guys, as always, and talking to you about all the fight announcements and all the other latest news in the world of mixed martial arts. So thanks again for tuning in today, guys. I'm Adam Martin. Check me out on Twitter. Also, check this podcast out at MMAOddsbreaker.com and on our YouTube channel. And check me out at bjpenn.com. Love working for those guys. Great website. And MMArings.net as well. It's the longest job I've ever had in my life, guys. I've been there since 2012 and continued writing for them. So thanks, Michael, for keeping me around for that long and tolerating me for going on 8 years now. So thanks a lot, guys. I appreciate you tuning in. Always, I'll be back at about 11 o'clock this morning talking UFC Newark with Cole Shelton. Until then, guys, have a great day, and I'll talk to you very shortly.